I think they already planned some big DLC for Hogwarts Legacy, looking at hints and clues you can already find in the game. Curious to hear your thoughts in the comments, a like would really support the channel, subscribe for more Hogwarts Legacy videos, and let's go. So the Bizarre Burrito posted a very interesting theory under one of our videos, which is that our time as a student at Hogwarts ultimately ties into the beginning of another very famous wizard story, Albus Dumbledore. The reason for this is that Albus first went to Hogwarts in 1892. Our 5th year takes place in 1890, meaning that our final year at Hogwarts would be Dumbledore's first, which has to be planned, right? Even though we've come to learn even more about his story in the Fantastic Beasts films, there is still a lot of mystery surrounding Albus, and I think that accompanying him as he comes to Hogwarts for his first year would be a really cool way to expand on his character. And this could also open up another location for us to visit, which holds a lot of significance in the wizarding world, Godric's Hollow. It is of course famous for the incident which killed Voldemort the first time and gave Harry a scar, but that has not happened yet in the 19th century. However, that's far from the only legend that spawned here, as it's the birthplace of Godric Gryffindor, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, as well as the final resting place of Ignotus Peverell, one of the 3 brothers from the story of the Deathly Hallows. Many notable wizarding families live or used to live here, including, you've guessed it, the Dumbledores. Albus and his family actually moved here after his father was imprisoned in the year 1891, which would be during our 6th year at Hogwarts. I would not be surprised if this was the plan from the start, so they would have an interesting tie-in for potential DLC where we experience our 6th and 7th years at Hogwarts. That is of course speculation on my end, but usually these things are planned for in advance. So then during our 6th year we'd be learning new spells, but in the meantime rumors of the tragic situation that caused Albus's father to end up in jail are spreading throughout the school. And then in our final year we meet a young Dumbledore, and as we're leaving school, pass along some of the secrets we have learned to him, which will set him on the path to becoming one of the greatest wizards ever known. And while I don't think that every story in the wizarding world needs to be tied back to the original 7 books, it's really a trend we see all over the place. Marvel is tying everything together, Star Wars is still leaning heavily on characters and stories from the first trilogy, and we can already see a similar thing where Newt's story in Fantastic Beasts turns into the greater story, which again is about Dumbledore. So I would not be surprised if Avalanche wants to tie their story into the main narrative of the wizarding world as well, and I think this is the best way of doing it. And there is actually another hint in the game that is kind of pointing to the whole Dumbledore-Grindelwald conflict, and it has to do with this guy right here. He stands out a bit because of his clothing already, but if you ever catch dialogue from him, you see that he also has a name, Hector Fawley, which means you are looking at the future Minister of Magic, specifically the one that was in power during the rise of Grindelwald, the same time period as the Fantastic Beasts movies. Now it could be that Avalanche decided to put this guy in as an Easter egg, but his character design really makes him stand out, which is not something they had to do. So again, I think they might have already planned this, and that we might come across Hector for a potential quest or 2 in the future. It might even be that we get to visit the Ministry of Magic with him, although he is of course no minister yet. Our visit to the Ministry is one of the theories we discussed in our Future is Bright video, so I don't want to repeat it here, but if you haven't watched that one yet, I will put a link to it in the video description. But while Dumbledore's rise to power is definitely a very strong focus for your story, I think a lot of people also want to spend more time with some of the new characters Avalanche has introduced, specifically your companions. And while we of course wrap up the storylines for each companion nicely over the course of the main game, I do think that all of them still have more stories to tell. I did some reading on the dragon you save with Poppy during her quest chain, and it turns out that the Hebridean Black is native to the Scottish Hebrides Islands, which I don't think are currently in the game. So who knows, maybe Poppy decides it's time to bring the dragon and her child home again, and we get to visit the Hebrides Islands and discover more of its wildlife. Keeping my fingers crossed for a dragon mount if that is true, by the way. Jordan has already been able to try this out with mods on PC and it looks great, plus there is still an open spot in the flying mounts menu that is not being used right now, so I can definitely see it happening. But visiting a group of islands in Scotland feels like a pretty natural expansion of the map, so I reckon this could be a separate DLC that also expands the open world. Now Sebastian's questline also has some very interesting points, but for that we would have to get into some heavy spoiler territory, which I already did in our choices and consequences video. So again, if you are curious, check it out via the link in the video description, as it's totally possible that we haven't seen the last of him, with our choices having a bigger impact on the future. But there are more Hogwarts students that give us clues as to where we might possibly go next. One of them is Nerida Roberts, who is working on establishing establishing contact with the Merpeople that live in the Black Lake. And she actually succeeds in this as the Merpeople left her an artifact in a sort of exchange of gifts. We know Merpeople are sentient, although like centaurs they refuse to be classified as a being by the Ministry of Magic, which leaves their relationship with the wizarding world in kind of an awkward position. But we might be able to help with that by visiting their underwater settlement and making contact with them. There are many ways in which a witch or wizard is able to safely swim underwater without losing breath, from gillyweed and shapeshifting to the bubblehead charm, so if this is where we are going, safe bet that one of those will be included as a mechanic too. And seeing how Hogwarts Legacy did a lot to teach us more about goblin culture, I think it's not that far of a stretch for the game to teach us more about other magical societies as well. But there is an even more interesting place in Hogwarts we might potentially explore, and that is the Chamber of Secrets. This is of course where Salazar Slytherin hid a basilisk that could be used by the heir of Slytherin to purge the school of impure blood. The entrance is hidden behind a tap in the witch's bathroom somewhere in the castle, marked by the symbol of Salazar Slytherin. And you can actually already find this exact spot in the game pretty close to the Slytherin dungeon. If you start at the viaduct entrance Flue Flame and enter the school from there, you want to take the small door on the right immediately after you enter and walk all the way down the stairs. Take a right and then another right to enter the witch's bathroom, where you can spot a weird marking on one of the taps. There's even a field guide page here that mentions the small snake on one of the taps, although it also says that no one knows what it means. Still though, we can't interact with it as the chamber can only be opened by the heir of Slytherin, which basically means it can only be opened by someone who speaks Parseltongue. And well, what do you know? We've already met someone who fits that description, as Slytherin student and Sebastian's friend Ominous is part of the Gaunt family, meaning he can speak Parseltongue. Now the chamber is a bit of a touchy subject, as we cannot kill or unleash the basilisk because that would contradict the events from the books. However, it is mentioned that there was clear evidence that the chamber had been opened more than once between its creation and the 20th century. So it's not impossible that one of these openings happened in the 19th century. And besides, it is called the Chamber of Secrets, plural, so I would imagine it has more to hide than just the basilisk, meaning there might be more dark secrets for us to discover when we go down there. But there is something that I do find difficult to wrap my head around. During Sebastian's quest, Ominous is very much presented as the voice of reason, and he is very reluctant to touch on anything related to his family or dark magic. Since this belief is even further reinforced at the end of Sebastian's questline, there has to be a very convincing reason for Ominous to speak Parseltongue and, pardon my pun, open the most ominous room in the entire castle. Still though, the entrance already exists in the game, it is a very interesting location to visit, and it's not completely out of the question, so I am keeping my hopes up. And while I hate to be the bearer of bad news, there is one theory that I've also seen a lot about a potential DLC about a Triwizard tournament. The Espresso also commented about it under a previous video, and there is an actual in-game clue as well, as the casing for the Goblet of Fire used in the tournament to decide the participants can be found in the trophy room, again with its own field guide page to boot. If you want to find it, simply go to the Flue Flame with the same name. If you want to check it out yourself, it's all the way at the top of the grand staircase. And it would be one hell of a quest though, with 3 challenges, which will then require their own preparations, which is an easy way to set us up with new spells, potions, plants, and other useful abilities. It would also introduce us to students from different wizarding schools, specifically Durmstrang and Beauxbaton, so all good things. But yeah, I'm not a big believer in this one. The problem is that, to my knowledge, a Triwizard tournament in 1890 would be in conflict with some of the established lore. During the introduction of the Triwizard tournament in Harry's time, it is said that the tournament had been cancelled because of the high death toll. This was in 1792. The only reason a new tournament was allowed in the 1990s was because of some very strict new regulations from the Ministry of Magic to ensure the safety of the students. Those worked out great, by the way, guys, good job. But anyway, I feel like a Triwizard tournament in 1890 would have certainly been mentioned before, which is why I think it's very unlikely to see that as a DLC. So did we miss any DLC hints or teases? Let us know in the comments, and of course subscribe to not miss any of our Hogwarts Legacy videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and if you want, you can watch our previous video on why we will likely see DLC by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.